Hey there, welcome to Pepper Geek. In this video, we're talking about the best peppers to grow in containers.
It's that time of year, the seed catalogs are starting to come in, and we're starting to get really excited about what varieties we're going to be growing in the garden this season.
So we're going to cover 6 of our favorite peppers to grow in containers, and specifically in smaller containers, because after all, you can pretty much grow any pepper variety in a container, but we're going to focus on those that do well in smaller pots.
And later on in the video, we're going to go over a few different varieties that we definitely prefer to grow in the ground as opposed to containers. First up on the list should be no surprise to anyone, and that is the Ahi Charapita. The Ahi Charapita is a Peruvian Chinense variety, and it's incredibly prolific and has been a favorite of ours in the garden for many years. It produces tons of tiny pods that are absolutely delicious, and they make an excellent dried powder. The Ahi Charapita falls at about 50,000 on the Scoville scale, so it's definitely really spicy, but it's a great way to add flavor to any dish in the kitchen.
I really love the Ahi Charapita for its flavor and usefulness, of course, but we really like growing it in containers because if you let the plants get too big by growing them in really big containers or even in the ground, you can end up with a really big harvest of these tiny little peppers, so harvesting actually becomes kind of a chore.
And this is why it's rumored to be the most expensive chili pepper in the world by weight, because it is so time-consuming to harvest the pods. And if you're looking for a good variety as kind of an alternative to the Ahi Charapita, the Quintisho pepper is awesome. It has a great growth habit, it's very sturdy, and the pods are kind of just like bigger versions of the Ahi Charapita. So definitely worth checking out if you've already grown the Ahi Charapita and you're looking for something different.
Next up is one of my favorites for making a really simple side dish, and that is the Shishido pepper. This is a Japanese variety from Capsicum annuum. You've probably seen Shishido peppers popping up at your local grocery store or even on menus at restaurants because blistered Shishidos are just so delicious and easy to make. And the plants are also great for growing in containers because they stay nice and compact. Even if you grow them in the ground or in a really big pot, they don't tend to get all that large, so you can keep them constrained to a pot of maybe 3 to 5 gallons, and the plants will grow to around 2 or 2.5 feet tall. Even on these smaller plants, you'll get tons of peppers. That's what I love about Shishidos. You get dozens of peppers, even though the plants are so small. And they tend to produce really early in the season because you're harvesting them before they ripen while they're still green.
And Shishido peppers are known as one of the Russian roulette peppers because 1 in every 10 peppers or so is supposed to be extra spicy.
We haven't really had that exact experience, but you definitely can detect some fluctuation in heat. They're not all that spicy to begin with, maybe 1 or 2,000 on the Scoville scale, so it's a more tame pepper.
Next up on the list is a gorgeous ornamental in the annuum species that actually won an award in 2006 for its unique characteristics. This variety is the black pearl pepper. The black pearl pepper does really well in containers, and it has gorgeous, striking black foliage due to the high levels of anthocyanins in the leaves. It also produces a lot of unique berry-like fruits that ripen from dark purple to bright red.
I think my favorite thing about the black pearl is just that foliage. There are a lot of dark foliage peppers out there, but this one in particular has almost a fuzzy-like appearance. It's like pearlescent, I would say, in the sunshine. It almost shines. It's just beautiful, but also the fruits can be pretty useful in the kitchen, which is kind of unique for an ornamental. A lot of ornamental peppers aren't all that useful when it comes to cooking. They just kind of look nice in the garden, and the fruits can go to waste, but not in the case of the black pearl.
And you really just like pirates, so of course you like the black pearl. This pepper lands anywhere from 10 to 30,000 on the Scoville scale, so not incredibly spicy, but it definitely packs a punch, and it's not a mild pepper by any means.
Next up is another award-winning pepper, and we happen to have one right here growing in this small container, and that is the Cayenne pepper. Now there are many different types of Cayenne peppers, of course, but they're all good candidates to grow in containers, and the reason is right in front of you here. This small plant is growing in less than a half-gallon container, and yet we have about a dozen peppers growing on it currently.
And cayenne peppers are probably our preferred pepper for making homemade pepper powder. They're absolutely delicious, and we have a video where we tried out many different varieties of cayennes that we grew in the garden and chose our favorites.
They're just the perfect heat level for making that powder, a perfect spice to add to anything, somewhere around 50,000 on the Scoville scale, depending on the type of cayenne that you grow. But the sky is the limit with cayenne peppers because if you grow them in larger containers, you will get much larger plants. Again, this is a perfect example of reducing a plant's size by limiting the plant's soil space.
Next up on the list is one of our personal favorites, and this is a thin-walled annuum variety from Japan called Santaka. We love this pepper so much that we actually include the seeds in our Pepper Geek growing kit. The Santaka pepper is a really compact, upright growing variety that lands at about 45,000 on the Scoville scale. The Santaka pepper is excellent for containers because of its compact, upright growth habit, making it great for growing on a sunny balcony if you just want to grab a few pods for the kitchen.
This is another great variety to make powder with. You can also make hot sauces, ferment them. And I also love using them throughout the winter by freezing some. You can just throw them into a freezer bag whole, throw them in the freezer, and they'll last for months.
And if you're looking for another red chili recommendation, I definitely recommend growing the Cobanero pepper. This pepper has become one of our favorites because the flavor is so delicious, and they've always been really healthy plants for us in the garden.
And the last pepper we love growing in containers, before we talk about a few that we prefer to grow in the ground, is the Scotch Bonnet. Scotch Bonnets come from the Capsicum chinense species, and they're the hottest pepper on this list, coming in at well over 100,000 on the Scoville scale. And the reason I like growing them in containers is because you can limit the size of the plants to get a reasonable harvest for your needs. I can't count the number of times we've grown huge ghost pepper plants or other really hot plants and ended up with a harvest that was kind of unusable to us, at least personally. So again, by limiting the soil space and growing a smaller Scotch bonnet plant, you end up with a reasonable number to use.
Yellow Scotch bonnets are definitely our preferred type to grow just because they have that amazing citrusy flavor and they work really well in hot sauce recipes.
Scotch bonnets are just the type that we chose, but you can pretty much grow any super hot pepper in containers. Think ghost peppers or reapers. Anything from Capsicum chinense tends to grow really well in containers, and you can scale up or down the size of the plant with the size of the pot.
A couple honorable mentions for other peppers that we love growing in containers. Banana peppers do really well in pots, and you typically get a pretty good harvest of them. They're one of the bigger peppers that you can grow in containers without sacrificing the yield.
And of course, we love growing jalapenos in pots. You can get a really good yield of jalapenos if you grow in a large enough container, and even in a smaller pot, you can get a nice handful of jalapenos to use up in the kitchen. Now moving on to just a couple varieties that we prefer to grow in the ground over growing in containers. The first of which is Capsicum baccatum varieties like the Ahi Amarillo, Ahi Cristal, or the Sugar Rush peppers. We've grown them in containers before, and they tend to get really tall and top heavy by the end of the season, meaning that a strong gust of wind can easily knock over your containers. In the ground, it's a lot easier to provide these plants with some support and prevent that problem.
And we also prefer to grow bell peppers in the ground as opposed to containers. And of course, you can grow bell peppers in large containers. We've done it for years. However, in our experience, we always have healthier plants and bigger yields when we grow them in the ground. Leave a comment below and let us know which pepper varieties you're going to be growing in containers in your garden this season.
Thanks for watching Pepper Geek, and we'll see you next time.